we go again. Friday, time for Slator Pod. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
So, another busy week. We have to talk about a few things that we had on the website that we're going to run through, but also an announcement that just came out this morning that we're going to talk about. So first, the announcement was by DeepL, and we're going to unpack this in a second. Then there was an article we wrote about UK, the gaming industry, and how the localization people, they surveyed localization people in about a dozen other categories. We're going to unpack that. The job index that we had, a couple of financial results in M&A, and then something in Mexico around dubbing. So we're going into, a geography that we typically don't really cover or haven't covered so much. So first, a little bit of housekeeping and announcements. Very pleased to announce that Zoo Digital, the media localization platform, is our diamond partner for SlatorCon London Media and Gaming. That's the event on May 5th. And also very happy to have MemoQ on board as a gold partner for the same event, also on May 5th. Of course, we have two events this time. We have the Media and Gaming event on May 5th, and then the tried and tested format SlatorCon on May 6th. So really glad to have Zoo Digital and MemoQ on board, and a lot of exciting speaker announcements are following in the next couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. Definitely excited about that one. So Esther, when I open up our editorial tool this morning, I looked at the headline that was something like AI breakthrough by DeepL. So I'm like, okay, let's analyze that. Let's look into that, because the last time that happened was somewhere in 2017. And that's where the whole DeepL craze started. So I was like, okay, what are they announcing now?
What's new? Yeah, what's new with DeepL?
Exactly, what's new with DeepL? So just to recap, DeepL is that Germany-based machine translation company that was basically an offshoot of Lingui, the I don't know what you would call it, the translation segmentation. Website that and then they used all these highly curated sentences and built a neural network on top of it and started DeepL. And since then, DeepL has gone on to become, I think in Switzerland, it's now among the top 20 websites visited of all the websites. Yeah. So top 20, that's crazy. So they must...
Everybody in Germany and sort of German-speaking Europe knows all about it.
Exactly. So
it's major.
Yeah, in Germany, I think they're around the top 150. In Switzerland, again, it's top 20. So this, literally like Google, Facebook, DeepL. Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy amount of traffic they're getting. Not so much used in the United States. I'm not sure about the UK. Do people talk about DeepL in the UK at all?
Not particularly, no. Not day to day. Obviously, language industry professionals, yes, but day to day, not so much. No, just be the likes of Google Translate, I suppose.
That is so interesting that like the solution that you think would make sense immediately globally actually has a regional focus, right? I think some of this is deliberate. I remember once somebody mentioned, I'm not sure if it was even DeepL themselves, that they don't really want to push too hard in the US for now because of some, I don't know, legal issues or certain other corporate issues that probably, it would be a different, on the corporate side might be a little more difficult. But anyway, so back to that supposed breakthrough. It was interesting that they've been relatively quiet on the media front. They got a lot of free PR when they launched in 2017, and people looked at it and felt that the quality for some of the core languages they delivered was actually superior to some of those, other players out there like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, etc. So they got a lot of PR for that, and traction has been amazing. They got a major investment by Benchmark, which is one of the, I guess, probably top 5, top 10 venture capital firms in the Silicon Valley. So it's been all great for them, and they've been relatively quiet on the media front. Not too much posting and blogging and speaking. I don't think they've ever really spoken at a major conference, as far as I remember. So this morning they said they had they announced another breakthrough in AI translation quality, using words such as a quantum leap in translation quality and that they're now using neural networks that are far superior to previous technologies. Of course, you know, I had to look, right? I had to go in and check. They also
did you test English to German then?
I tested English to German, right?
Okay.
Now, obviously, completely non-representative. But first, I went through their blog post, and they said that they blind tested like 119 passages. They called it lengthy passages. They asked professional translators to evaluate, and you know, in a blind test. And surprise, you know, in 2/3 of the cases, or 60-70%, they preferred DeepL over. I think they tested with Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So I went in. I was like, in a sense, I was excited. I was thinking, well, now you're sensing another major breakthrough in quality.
Yeah. What could it be?
What could it be, right?
I mean, it was already pretty good, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good. But there's these usual neural mistakes where, like, sometimes it introduces words that don't really belong there, or like it kind of falls apart when the sentence is lengthy. And, you know, this is a completely unscientific test, but I did run a news article just before this podcast, and I didn't sense a major quality leap, frankly. I mean, so I tested it against Google Translate and Systrans' new public MT engine, which actually you can select different verticals there as well, different types of content domains. Didn't blow me away. The new DeepL translation, there was in the second sentences, there was a major mistranslation. It basically introduced a word that wasn't there in the original, that made no sense. Yeah. And I mean, it should basically the half of the sentence was completely mistranslated, right? So I don't know, maybe it's the early innings of this particular rollout of this new neural network, but you know, as far as I can say, now it just completely anecdotal feedback, no major breakthrough. Interesting is also that they're starting to use these types of words. It used to be more that Microsoft used to have
quite
these,
hyped up.
Yeah, it used to have, Microsoft had a few of these, like, you know, now human level machine translation announcement a couple of years back, and now, you know, DeepL is coming out with words like breakthrough, quantum leap, and far superior. I don't know. I think they have enough traction. I'm not sure why they need to announce it in that type of way, but let's see. Definitely getting a lot of traction here, as I said, in Switzerland, not just from a traffic point of view, but also on the corporate side. I think I did mention in a previous podcast that the Swiss government bought like 2,000 licenses, and that's a pretty good case study for them. So we shall see. But so far, still the usual NMT errors, introducing words, sometimes breaking apart when it's a little too long, etc. So you had on a very different note, you had a story this week about the UK gaming industry. What happened there?
Yeah, so this was an article that Marion published, I think, talking about a survey that had been carried out by a gaming association based in the UK called ukie, in collaboration with Sheffield University and also the Arts and Humanities Council in the UK. So this was a survey of the gaming industry and professionals working in the industry. So as you said, it broke down different employees into their different functions, of which localization was one of these categories, albeit there wasn't a huge number of localization professionals compared to, you know, maybe some other functions like development, etc. I think overall localization professionals accounted for about 2% of the gaming workforce.
And the sample size was how big?
Sample size, I think, was pretty large, in the thousands.
Okay, so even if it's 2%, we're still talking about like 100.
We're still talking about a lot of people. Okay. Yeah, we're still talking about a good sample, significant sample.
Okay.
But I mean, interestingly, localization professionals in the context of the gaming industry were outliers in almost every category that the survey questions pertain to. So, I mean, the survey was looking at areas such as diversity, both in terms of nationality and also in terms of ethnicity. Localization professionals, perhaps unsurprisingly, were the most diverse group of employees across nationalities and ethnicities. I mean, probably not surprising.
That's not surprising.
It is what we do. And then also on the gender, on the gender matrix, it was the most balanced across the genders. So 46%, almost half of localization employees in gaming are female, according to the survey in the UK. And it also had the fewest number of people who were self-reporting as anxious and depressed. So apparently localization professionals, at least in gaming, can't speak for other areas, but are least anxious and least depressed.
Is that because they're so
among
smart?
other colleagues?
Okay. There was another one with the post-grad.
Because they're so yeah, so also best educated, I suppose you could put it in that way, in terms of postgraduate degrees. So the localization professionals in gaming in the UK had more postgraduate degrees.
That is
or
so
more of them had postgraduate degrees.
I mean,
and 87% in total had 87% of localization professionals had either a bachelor's or a postgrad, or both.
Okay, so the least anxious, least depressed. That's an interesting one, but it's almost like I don't know what to do with that. That's just like. Okay,
yeah, sure.
12% are depressed.
Well, and also it's self-reported, isn't it? It's not necessarily.
Well, there was the writers.
Really find out any other way.
I think the writers were like almost half. So half of writers would report that they're anxious and depressed. I don't know, but this is okay. Noted.
Maybe it's job satisfaction.
Job satisfaction, and we're certainly looking forward to our media and gaming conference because it seems to be a happy bunch, right? So that's going to be fun. The postgrad is interesting though. So is that because I think if you're doing a translation or a localization degree, I think in the UK it's mostly translation degrees. I think. I mean, you can't do this on a bachelor level, can you? Most of them are postgrad.
It might have changed. Certainly, when I was at university, it was predominantly language study at undergrad. Obviously, you would have elements of translation within that, but to specialize in either translation or interpreting, it tended to be a master's degree that you have to take that up. Yeah. Actually, I do know, I think at least one university in London that does translation at undergrad.
Okay. But yeah, you're right. It's probably typically you take a language degree as undergrad and then you want to go on into a translation field. I mean, my time as well, obviously it's 15 years ago, but it was the same. It was, you graduate in a language and then you go on and do an MA in translation or interpreting. Interesting. Yeah, it was more than half that had a postgrad. It was far more than in any other job function. So definitely interesting stats, and thank you so much to the what's it called, ukie, ukie, yes,
UKIE,
UKIE for putting this together. And then speaking about jobs, we published our very own job index. How did that? I think there was a little dip in Jan, and how was it in Feb?
Yeah, so February, the job index seems to have rebounded to a new high. Which is interesting. As you say, it dropped in January, and it had also dropped in January 2019, so last year, and also rebounded in February. However, in 2019, it took 6 months or so for the index to come back up to the levels pre-January. This year, not so. So February actually saw the job index climb to a new high. So potentially an interesting trend to watch for seasonal trends, I suppose. So it's now at more than 9% above the index when we started, which was July 2018. And I do remember, obviously, early days back in July 2018, August, when we were publishing the job index, we had sort of 1, 2, 3 data points on the chart. So but obviously not starting out as a meaningful index, but now that we've got 20 or so months worth of data, it's actually interesting to see the development and potentially some trends emerging as well.
Yeah, we might have spoken about it the last time we ran it 4 weeks ago. I don't remember, but I think that the way you compile this is like a mix between like LinkedIn job ads and open positions and so it's I think it's very
and
meaningful.
Numbers. In terms of numbers of people.
Yeah, numbers of people, numbers of profiles, numbers of job openings for localization professionals, etc. So yeah, it's good.
Worldwide,
it seems to be bouncing back despite all the macroeconomic craziness that's going on around the world. I think overall, at least our part of the economy is still holding up very, very well. So that's interesting. Another result that came out was, we always cover the results of a lot of these publicly listed companies. So this week it was Straker's turn. Straker, Straker Translations, the New Zealand-based, Australia-listed language service provider. Still relatively small. I think they're doing roughly, let me read this off there. They're probably doing around close to $20 million in revenue for the year overall. But yeah, they reported on their third quarter of their financial year. And I think we spoke at length about this before we published the article. They're using somewhat unusual metrics to report, because usually you have the top line is revenue, and then the bottom line is something like earnings before interest. But they're using what is it called? Cash inflows, and then for revenue, cash. And then cash outflow, or I guess inflow for the bottom line, right? So they had about $4.5 million in inflows, what you would call revenue. That was just 2% above the same quarter a year ago, and then they took a little bit of a loss at roughly $200,000 in net cash outflow. But again, it's kind of hard to compare, maybe or it's a different metric when you're comparing to the usual revenue metrics. Long story short, they're growing at a leisurely pace, and they're basically not fully profitable. They're basically roughly around break even. So what was some of the reasons they gave for that relative softness in their third quarter?
Oh, you're testing my memory now.
Yeah.
Why did they say it was flat?
The enterprise aspect.
The enterprise. That's right. Yes. So they were talking. I mean, they've said for a few months now, when they've been reporting, that they're trying to make a concerted effort to move away from the more transactional customers. So the sort of SEO generated personal customers, one-off type requests, and actually move more into longer life cycle projects that come with enterprise customers. So this was their explanation in any case, that apparently they'd closed a deal for something that was near, what did they say, near six figures,
seven
figures. Yeah. Near seven figures in New Zealand dollars, I think, in terms of contract value. So potentially a bigger contract value than the ones they might have been used to working with under the transactional customers. But obviously, because life cycles and projects take longer to complete, potentially also, although they didn't explicitly say this, payment terms may be slightly longer for enterprise customers. It potentially takes slightly longer time to actually show in revenues.
Yeah, it was an interesting deal as well.
One explanation.
I think they said they opened an office in Burbank, California. It was a media localization deal, dubbing and no, it was subtitling. They said they were partnering with on the dubbing side. So they're also getting into the media localization space. We've spoken about this a few times before on this podcast, but it is one of the fast growing verticals, and they're getting a piece of the action now. So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean those payment terms and just generally an enterprise sale is different, right? If you're coming from a world where you're getting a lot of requests from the internet, like one-offs, and you're in a position to just handle maybe 1,000 or 500 individual requests a day, and from individual payers, and you make sure that you're getting paid immediately upon delivery, or maybe even before you deliver. And now you're going into an enterprise cycle where you get a $500,000, $1 million project. You work on it, you spend all the money on your resources, and then you collect maybe 60 days after the project's complete. That's a very, very different business, and that's as you're transitioning, this is bound to have an impact on them. So let's see how they go. They're obviously super transparent. They have to report every quarter. We shall be on top of it. What we missed the earnings call though. They had a call with the analysts, but it's in a strange time zone, so we didn't manage to listen in on that. But we'll
a strange time zone. Down under.
Not for Andrew. Our co-founder Andrew Smart. He's actually in Sydney at the moment, so he could have listened in, but he was busy with some other stuff. So we shall dial in next time. Staying with Media Lock, what happened in Mexico?
Yeah, interesting story emerging in Mexico, and it's not a market that we've particularly covered that much on Slater. But yeah, dubbing and film dubbing in particular is at the center of a debate which has made it into Congress. This story was relating to a senator who presented an initiative about dubbing. So he's in the pro-dubbing camp, where he wants to see any foreign language film that comes into Mexico and shown in movie theaters be dubbed into Spanish as standard, and also dubbed into at least one indigenous language. So he's obviously got the support of voice actors, dubbing actors, because that would generate quite a considerable amount of more work, I imagine, for them. And obviously give a boost to the localization dubbing industry generally in Mexico. Then it also does face some opposition, however, from people who are more on the motion picture side. So there's a motion picture academy in Mexico who are quite happy with what the current regulations and the current laws say around provision of subtitling or dubbing at the moment. So that the current laws say that foreign language films, i.e. if they're created in English or French or what have you, should be shown in their original language in Mexican theaters, and they may be subtitled where appropriate. So there's not actually any specific requirements about providing Spanish or any other language alongside the original. There is mention of dubbing in the current laws, but actually dubbing is only suggested to be used for children's content or for educational content. And I think they are pretty happy with that. The Academy, they take maybe more of a purist stance, where they say that actually any kind of changes to the original script, including actors' voices, is kind of a violation of the audience's right to consume content in the way it was intended. So I suppose it's sort of an artistic and creative point of view where they want to preserve the original. So not sure how this is going to play out, but obviously actors are in support of more dubbing, equals more work for them. And it's gone to the congressional session now. So I think one to watch over the next few months or so.
I think it's interesting because it's a cultural question. You know, I mean, I grew up on dub TV shows. Everything was dubbed into German, you know, Switzerland being, I'm from the German-speaking part of Switzerland, and we watched all these German channels, and in Germany, dubbing has been historically, everything was dubbed, right? As opposed to, for example, Scandinavia, where traditionally everything's been subtitled. That's why the Scandinavians speak flawless English, and we have to learn it under, great pains in school. Right? So it would be interesting if a country moved from what appears in Mexico now, a subtitling culture, into a dubbing culture, because people, they react differently. Here in Switzerland, in the cinemas, it's typically subtitled. In Switzerland, on TV, it's dubbed, but in the cinema, it's actually subtitled.
But do you in cinemas, do you have multiple tracks though? Because obviously Switzerland is a multilingual country.
That's the reason.
Are there multiple tracks for different languages?
Well, that's the reason why it's subtitled, as opposed to Germany, where everything's dubbed. Because in Germany, it's German, right? So, but if you roll out a film, or if you maybe do the rights management for a film into Switzerland, we got the Italian and the French population, French-speaking population. Yeah. So when you watch, it's typically in German and French, the subtitles. But again, on TV, you watch German channels, everything's dubbed. What about England? If you go in London, you go to the cinema, you watch a Mexican movie, is it subtitled or dubbed?
Yes.
Subtitled.
Yeah. We don't have dubbing particularly. Yeah. I can't speak for other people, but I think, coming from a languages background, I don't know. I don't like to hear dubbing personally.
I think that might
it doesn't feel as authentic. And
with streaming, this whole culture might change a little bit, because I think now there's a fair amount of demand for, like Korean content, Asian content, generally this type of content into the US, right? Because Netflix is doing all these originals in non-English speaking countries. I think they're going to dub some of that. So maybe there will be.
And what I have realized actually is that I'm perfectly happy to watch subtitles in languages that I feel familiar with. So, French, Spanish, Italian to a certain extent, I'm really happy to sit and read subtitles because I can actually, the voices sound reasonably familiar to me. But if it's a language which is quite foreign, literally foreign to me, that I don't really have any experience of or exposure to, it's more difficult to sit and read subtitles. That's my personal experience, and I think in those instances, if it's in Chinese, Japanese, or what have you, I'd probably be more inclined to listen to a dub version. Or watch dub version. Yeah.
And now that we're getting machine dubbing with Amazon, like we talked, I think last time with in our previous podcast once. Let's see how that plays out eventually. No, but I think it's an interesting question, and as content flows so much more internationally, it used to be like almost like a one-way road, like for like the average consumer just out of Hollywood, and then you either dub it or you subtitle it. But now with this content being created and shared through streaming much more globally, subtitling, dubbing question will become it's a bigger question. Maybe that's what triggered it in Mexico, right? We had we had a small M&A transaction. Maybe just broach this briefly. A Swiss German-based company called Apostroph Group acquired a Swiss small LSP. We covered it. There's been a few deals, but that's, I think, there's probably a fair amount of deals in the pipeline, but so far this year hasn't been super strong in terms of deals. So we'll see how that goes.
Had three. This was the fourth one I think that we've tracked so far in 2020.
One. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the only real significant one, I suppose, would be the AMN Healthcare and Stratus that we
You're
discussed
right.
last
We spoke
week.
about that. Yeah, that was a big one.
It's ongoing. It's ongoing though, so technically not completed, but yeah.
Yeah, we wrote a big piece about it and published it. That was Seema. As I said in the last podcast, she's based in the US, so she did a real deep dive. That's available to our Slator Pro subscribers. So anybody who has a subscription, go read it. Anybody who doesn't, make sure you subscribe to that service. It's definitely a lot of value for money because there's a lot of interesting content that we're publishing under the Slator Pro subscription. Great. Well, on that note, sending my greetings up to London. And looking forward to chatting next
back
week.
At you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.